Hey everybody, it's Andy Yanez here, and you're watching another episode of Pawd Slama Jama. On this episode, we're going to be previewing the upcoming matchup between the Houston Cougars football team and the Kansas Jayhawks this Saturday, kicking off from Kansas City, Missouri. And at the end of the episode, we'll also touch on the men's basketball season. A lot coming as the basketball season is right around the corner, just a couple weeks away. We'll get into it on this episode of Pawd Slama Jama.
Got high standards, high goals, and we know what it takes to get there.
I want to be unguardable, if I'm honest.
Coaches coach, players play.
And that's a great place to be in your life. We could care less what other people think.
All right, and joining me as always, Dayon Dunlap we're recording this on Wednesday night. How are you doing, sir?
All is well. Still feeling good off that Cougar win against TCU. Basketball season's right around the corner. I'm feeling pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm sure where you're at, you felt the coolness much more than here down in Houston, but it felt good walking outside and not getting hit with instant humidity and 90-degree heat for the first time. So excited for that. It's supposed to get into the 40s this Thursday morning. So it's officially fall, and that can only mean one thing. We're starting to get into the meat and potatoes of the football season. And like you said, basketball season right around the corner. But let's start with the football season. Like you mentioned, the Houston Cougars are going to try to carry that momentum from their victory right before their bye week over TCU. They went up to Fort Worth and stunned the Horned Frogs in the victory, and obviously a big reason for the Cougars defeating TCU in that 30-19 win was because of quarterback Zeon Chris, who took a bulk of the carries, was the starter and never let go of that position against TCU 2 weeks ago. And really, he played about as well. He did a good job of executing a game plan against TCU. Obviously, he was 15 of 18 when it came to completions and attempts, 141 passing yards, threw for a touchdown, no interceptions, and then he also had 97 rushing yards on the ground, and he also rushed for the touchdown. Obviously, that came off the big 71-yard gallop that he had into the end zone. And like you mentioned, Dayon, Houston trying to carry momentum against a Kansas Jayhawks football team that's entering this matchup struggling themselves. They won their first game of the season against Lindenwood, and then they have lost 5 straight in a row. And you look at the opponents, Houston, they have 2 common opponents so far. The Houston and Kansas have played, one being UNLV, who obviously we know how that happened, how that game went for Houston, the first game of the season here at TDECU Stadium. But they also played TCU. Kansas lost to UNLV 23-20, so they fared better than UH did. But Kansas lost to TCU 38-27. That was a home game for the Jayhawks, so obviously the Cougars did much better against TCU. They went up there in the Horned Frogs home field and they beat them. So heading into this matchup, we heard from head coach Willie Fritz in his Monday presser. Now there's no question. They're sticking. Zeon Chris is the guy. He's their quarterback one heading for this matchup and going forward. So I'm excited to see what kind of offense, what kind of plays, what kind of calls they run for this Houston Cougars offense now that they've had 2 weeks essentially to prepare for Kansas, and now they haven't had to split the reps because they know that Zeon Chris is quarterback one.
And I think they have film to kind of go off of in game versus all the practice reps that he's had to be able to build on some of the things that he did well in that game and continue doing those. And I think keeping it to one read, being progressed, maybe to give them 2 or 3 reads as far as open up the passing game just a little bit more. But they definitely did do a good job of execution. I think now they kind of built an identity with him at quarterback and seeing how they want to play and using his strengths and his running as a threat. And he did a good job of early in that game picking and choosing. Well, I would say the play caller OC did a good job of mixing in a winning call, design runs for him and using play action. And so I'm excited for this offense. It kind of feels like a new look offense, like they now were reborn per se, and now they kind of have an identity and see if they can build on it, especially against a Kansas team that's struggling. they're struggling. They're up surprisingly, especially with Jalen Daniels coming back, their running back coming back. I think they came into the season ranked, and so very surprising for the struggles that they've had. But hopefully Houston can win 2 in a row. I mean that'll be big.
Yeah, the big thing for Kansas is their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, like you mentioned, Dayon. The biggest thing against him, because Houston Cougars have seen his ability firsthand in the previous matchups that they've had against the Jayhawks over the years, but the biggest question for him has always been his availability. It definitely hasn't been when it comes to on the field what he's been able to put together. But this season, he suffered from injuries, but he's also suffered. I mean, he just hasn't had that good of a season so far. When you look at his numbers for the year, he has thrown for 7 touchdowns. He's thrown for 8 interceptions, only has 1,065 passing yards. And overall, it's been really intriguing how, like you mentioned, Dayon, heading into the season, this Kansas team actually had a lot of expectations, specifically when it came to that offense, and they just have not lived up to those expectations. Jalen Daniels has been sacked 7 times. Their leading rusher, you mentioned the running back, Devin Neal, who's rushed for 584 yards. Their top receiver is Luke Grimm, who leads them with 354 receiving yards. But top to bottom, that passing offense just has not been as explosive as they were expected to heading into this season. And that's a big reason why Kansas is struggling when you look at a lot of these losses. I mean, think back to TCU, where heading into the matchup, heading into Houston's matchup with TCU, we talked about how explosive the TCU offense was heading into the matchup. Now, give credit to Houston's defense. They held them to 19 points. But outside of that first game of the season for Kansas, their offense has really struggled. Only scored 17 points against Illinois, only 20 points against UNLV. They did a little bit better the past 3 games, but even still, nothing as explosive as you thought this offense was capable of. Only 28 against West Virginia, 27 TCU, 31 against Arizona State.
And that's exactly what I was just thinking as she was reeling off some of those stats with Houston's strengths of the team being their defense. I think they're ranked in the top 25 nationally with the defense that they've been able to play. And I think they even have even more minimum coming off a win against TCU. And one thing they were able to do against TCU, and I'm sure they'll be looking to do, is turn the ball over. Be able to turn the ball over, get the offensive extra possession. I think if they can do that, give the offense a short field or just kind of build some early momentum, that'll help Yanez offense maybe get a big play and kind of get settled in early and be able to play from a lead. Because playing the style that Houston kind of wants to play now with the run first and the quick passing game, it's almost tailor-made for a lead to be able to control the time of possession. And so I think that defense really has to lead the way, get some 3 and outs, get the offense some good field position, win the field position battle. And the offense just execute, stay in short second and third down and keep the defense honest. But I think the defense definitely has to carry the way. And I think for the challenge, like you just mentioned, Kansas offense has been struggling. They have a new OC, offensive coordinator, who's coming from a place where he really didn't have any success. And now he's kind of duplicating what he had last year at his previous stop. And so I'm excited for this defense if they can build on success that they've been having all year, but primarily on the road against TCU, against some very, very explosive offense with a lot of good playmakers. So, but last time they saw Jalen Daniels, although it was a different scheme, he was able to really show his dual threat ability. So, being able to keep him contained and make him beat you from the pocket, I think they'll have a good shot.
Yeah, when we talk about this Houston Cougars defense, Dayon, like you alluded to, one of the biggest strengths for the Cougars has been just limiting and making a lot of opposing offenses one-dimensional. Houston, and we're talking about all of Division I FBS football, is actually 18th in the country when it comes to fewest yards allowed per game. They're only allowing opponents are only averaging 295 total yards of offense against this Houston Cougars defense heading into this matchup. So clearly the Cougars defense, that's been their calling card for an overwhelming majority of the season. And obviously they're going to be looking to build off and just continue and be stronger. When you look at Kansas, that has not been the case for them defensively either. They've, when it comes to their defense, they are 69th in the country when it comes to total offensive yards that they're allowing to opponents, about 361 yards. So that potentially could be something that Houston sees success in this Saturday. And down, like you mentioned, it feels like just with Zion Chris, this offense has a little bit of a new identity, a lot more fresh air. And I think one of the big reasons for that, we kind of touched on in the episode leading up to the TCU matchup, but Zion Chris provides something that we just didn't see at the beginning of the season with Donovan Smith. It's just the ability where, and he's shown it, that's the right word, explosiveness. With Zion Chris, any given play, he has the opportunity where he could just take it all the way. And that's the explosiveness, just that threat that just
And an
gives this Houston
elusiveness.
offense Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Explosiveness and elusiveness to be able, like you said, to take it 40, 50, 60, 70 yards like he showed in the bleed of a knife. It's blocked right, one man that he can make a miss and he can take that short gain and take it the distance and giving that extra element. I think that opens it a little bit more for the running backs and that in which Houston is doing a good job of using the plethora of running backs that they have so far for the ones that they've used. And so I think if they can stay on that and build on that, I think this team definitely has a good shot of going to Kansas, getting back-to-back road wins, because I really like the way that Jamarion Burnett played. I think he's a different type of back than any of the backs that they have, and he really looked the part out there. And I think he can build on that success with his downhill running, that the defense definitely has to stay honest and keep someone extra in the box, and then be able to open up that read option for Zion to get outside, and also the quick the run pass option as well. They did a good job of executing that as well. And so I'm excited, and I think this Houston fan base, as well as you and I, are looking for a quarterback to get behind. And the last few quarterbacks that they have outside of Clayton Tune, I wouldn't say he really was explosive, but De'Aaron King and Greg Ward, I mean, those two were explosive and elusive. And I think he kind of can give Cougs fans that type of excitement if he can continue to develop and add some of the other elements to his game to go along with that elusiveness and explosiveness.
Again, looking at the matchup, the numbers wise, now obviously, the game, any given Saturday, anything can happen. But heading into this matchup, the Jayhawks are 82nd in the entire country when it comes to opposing rushing defense. They're allowing opposing teams to average 157 rushing yards on the ground, which could bode well for Houston, like you mentioned, not just for Zion Chris, but for the plethora of running backs, which it has kind of been established, a three-headed monster that the Cougars have been running, most definitely at least a dynamic duo with Stacey Sneed and Rashawn Sanford. And like you mentioned, Jamarion Burnett showed us his potential in their previous matchup against TCU. So if there's one area of strength that this offense is certainly going to hope to rely on in this game, it's certainly going to be its rushing attack. And if they're able to execute and get first downs, keep the chains moving, most importantly, get their defense some rest, because we saw against TCU when that Houston Cougars defense gets rested up, they dominated TCU for an overwhelming majority of that game. And if Houston can control the time of possession by winning the ground game against Kansas, it's going to bode well for Houston. And for the first, listen, we might be talking about a 2-game winning streak if they're able to execute. Not only that, but a 2-game road winning streak in the Big 12, which would have been a wild thing to say just 2 weeks ago before Houston played TCU. But on the topic of Big 12, let's look at the conference standings for football right now. BYU and Iowa State and Texas Tech are atop the conference, each with a 3-0 conference record. Individually, BYU and Iowa State are still undefeated overall in the season. They're both 6-0. Texas Tech, while they're undefeated in conference at 3-0, they are 5-1. Kansas State, Arizona State, Cincinnati, Colorado, West Virginia are all tied with the 2-1 conference record. And then you have Arizona, UCF, Houston, Utah, and TCU tied with each other at 1-2. And then at the bottom of the conference, obviously the big surprise, at least early on. Oklahoma State at the bottom at 0-3, tied with Baylor and this Kansas team that Houston's going to be seeing on Saturday at 0-3. So if Houston can go up to Kansas City, back-to-back wins, and pull off that victory against the Jayhawks, they'll be at 500 when it comes to their conference record. And crazier things have happened, but it would certainly be we touched on it in the Let's Rage Cougs after they beat TCU, but there just seems to be a lot more optimism, a lot more joy around this football team with the performance they did against TCU. And if they can continue that and go ahead and put together another strong performance and get another win against Kansas, I think that's just going to continue to build that positive momentum. And, the fans will have a lot of excitement and much more trust in the coaching staff and Willie Fritz.
Most definitely. And I think with that TCU game is so important, and we kind of hinted this after the Let's Raise Cougs, but we was able, they put out a number, I think it had 1 million some viewership, and I think that could really be one of the biggest wins of the season, just from a recruiting standpoint, and then going, if they can get back-to-back wins and build on that, I think not only will the fan base continue to support and be behind Coach Fritz and staff, but I think that'll bode well for the recruits to be able to see, okay, they are getting better as the season progresses, and they then kind of seeing, with Zion, they have a quarterback in place that they can kind of have some confidence in. And so I think it's on the up and up, and it didn't look like this just a couple weeks ago. And so it's just a week-to-week basis on how something can change so swiftly after one win.
Looking at the betting lines, Kansas is favored by 6.5 points on the road. The spread is, or the over-under is 47.5 points between the two. So, that's a very interesting line. If I was in Vegas and if I bet, maybe I'm going to put some money on Houston there. Kansas is 6.5 point favorites at home. Now, the game is set to kick off at 2:30 p.m. It will stream on ESPN Plus, so it'll be an ESPN Plus exclusive game this Saturday between Houston and Kansas, again at 2:30 p.m. kickoff. That being said, let's go ahead and transition over to hardwood. Like you mentioned, Dayon, it's right around the season, basketball season, and it really got highlighted. It became more real this past week when the first top 25 rankings, the Associated Press media poll, was released this past Monday, October 14th, in which Houston was once again in the top 5. They were ranked 4th in the country in the preseason poll. They actually got 4 first-place votes. I'll list out the top 10. So Kansas ended up being number 1 on the preseason poll. Alabama at 2, UConn at 3, Houston at 4, Iowa State at 5, Gonzaga at 6, Duke at 7, Baylor at 8, North Carolina at 9, and Arizona to round out the top 10. So just a reminder of how brutal the Big 12 conference play schedule will be for the Cougars. And quite frankly, every single team in the Big 12, there are 5 out of those top 10 Big 10, 5 out of those top 10 teams in the top 25 were Big 12 schools. So just a reminder of how brutal the schedule is going to be once conference play starts. So with the exhibition game right around the corner, what are some of your thoughts when it comes to the Houston Cougars roster? Of course, we haven't seen no games yet. A lot of predictions. At the end of the day, this entire top 25 poll is quite frankly based on reputation above everything. Well, projections and reputation as well. Kansas is a number 1. I think reputation's got to be. I don't.
No, you're right. You're right.
I wouldn't know if I would have them at number 1, especially. Even Alabama's ranked high. UConn, the reigning back-to-back national champions, at 3rd. But that being said, it is right around the corner. What are your thoughts? And what are you excited to see about this Houston Cougars basketball team going forward? One of the few times that Kelvin Sampson, at least in Houston in recent memory, he's going to be bringing back an overwhelming majority of his starting lineup, bringing back 4 out of last year's 5 starters, which is a little bit of uncharted territory for Houston the last couple of seasons, where they've usually been having to replace 4 starters. That's not going to be the case this year.
I'm looking forward to seeing the identity of this team offensively. I think we know the culture is established, how they're going to play defensively and how hard they're going to play with their energy and effort. But with the new addition of the point guard, I want to see what the identity is. I think LJ will probably be I think he'll probably be one of the go-to players, the go-to, the 1-8 option. But I'm looking forward to see if Emmanuel takes that next step and really add more to his game and continue to develop to be an overall scorer versus a catch and shoot 3-and-D guy. I think he has that ability to do so, and I think he'll have the ball in his hands a little bit more to be able to showcase that a little bit more. And so that's some of the things I'll be looking for early. And then kind of the rotation, what the rotation will look like. I mean, this team has a bunch of returning pieces, so it's not nothing like you said they were used to. So some people were kind of established their role primarily with Wilson and Ramon, and I think JoJo is going to have even an expanded role as well. And so I just want to see what this team is going to look like and the role pieces, just overall what this identity will look like. We know the culture and established that's set, but this team will have a new identity because they have some new pieces.
Yeah, the big one's going to be Milo's.
Milo.
When it comes to how they're able to, well, how different it's going to be when it comes to the point guard position. Obviously, they're not going to be able to replace Jamal Shead and what he brought to the table when it came to just the different stuff that he brought to the table when it comes to leadership, his ability to run the offense. That's the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. His ability, everything that he brought to the table is not going to be easy to replace. Quite frankly, you just can't replace it. They're going to have to find their own identity and find a different style that fits this team. But going back to your point about Emmanuel Sharp, he might be a player that we get to see a much more versatile side. And hearing from a couple things that in interviews that Emmanuel Sharp has mentioned over the offseason and even this past Tuesday when they spoke to local media. But Dan, you touched on this way back when we first had Emmanuel Sharp before he even stepped foot on campus. But prior to his injury when he was in high school, Emmanuel Sharp was much more than a catch and shoot player. He could do it all. He could attack off the dribble. He could make plays. And it'd be interesting to see if we kind of see more of that in this upcoming season with Emmanuel, because, well, we saw it a little bit last season, and one of the big reasons why is because he was such a deadly catch and shoot player that teams were running him off the 3-point line, but he showed he's able to put the ball on the floor and play make, and he started drawing a lot of and ones and making just plays in general at the end of last season.
A lot of assists, yep. Yeah, I want to see him do that more consistently and be able to maybe up his point average total a little bit more. And so I'm excited. I'm excited. I want to see what everyone has to bring. I mean, different points to their game. I'm just thinking about the way that Houston lost in the tournament. I think there's definitely room for everyone to get better, particularly with JVR and J1, to see how they both can expand their games. I think JVA need to get stronger, seeing how it was a struggle going against Filipowski, who is an NBA player. And so I'm excited for this team. I know the offseason work is top notch with Coach Bishop and staff. And so I'm ready for a new year. I think, like you said, our reputation precedes us. As far as Cougars, we're number 4 in this season. And I'm looking forward to it. I think this team has one mission, and that's to get that banner that we're missing. I mean, we got Final Fours, Elite Eights, and Sweet 16s. Now it's time to bring the big boy home. Let's go get that natty.
Yeah, you're reiterating the message that Jawan Roberts really said. Obviously, he was one of the big ones when it came to
all of them. Matter of fact,
that he's kind of dubbed as the Run It Back campaign. But they asked him about really what that process was like for him to return to college one more year. And Dan, you hit the nail right on the head. That's the last thing that they're looking to accomplish, get that big national championship, because that's, like you mentioned, that's the only banner they're missing. They've done pretty much everything else. First year in the Big 12, they won the Big 12 regular season title. And I guess one of the other things they could get is the Big 12 postseason banner, but that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the NCAA championship. That's the last thing. That's really the last missing hardware that they want to collect on their trophy. And for a lot of these guys, you think of Jawan Roberts, like, this is it. And there's not going to be another year after this year. This is it. So
and you think of me how much it'll mean for Coach Sampson, his first one. And,
exactly.
I mean, that'd mean a lot for especially J1 being a part of all the success they had, then helping Coach Sampson win his first one. That'd be monumental.
Yep, Jawan's been through it all from that first Final Four team that they had in 2021 through just everything that they've been since then. And like you mentioned, for Coach Calvin Sampson, just being able to get to play on that Monday in April and win the whole thing. That's going to be the big thing that Houston's striving for. And obviously, they're in the beginning stages of that whole process, which they hope is a deep run to that first Monday in April of 2025. That being said, like I said again, October 27th, that is going to be the exhibition game, the first real look at the Houston Cougars men's basketball team for the 24-25 season. So it's going to be interesting to see how Houston looks. Obviously, just an exhibition game, so not a lot that's going to, when it comes to, it's an exhibition game at the end of the day, but it's going to be a cool opportunity just to get to see the team again on the court. And before you know it, it'll be the regular season games, and
I think
November
when
goes
it's
into
an exhibition
December.
game, one thing that I'm looking forward to is seeing the young players. They're going to play in an exhibition game, and so I want to see how they compete at the college level against college athletes, being able to be backups or whatever the case may be. It'll be a new level for me to kind of see is how they play, and at this level, I'm going to be looking for that as well.
Yep. So November, right around the corner. Like I said, eventually November comes to December, then January, and so on. And before you know it, March is around the corner as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what this iteration of the Houston Cougars team looks this season for 24-25. But like we mentioned at the top of the segment, expectations sky high, as always, for the Houston Cougars men's basketball team. And again, that's a testament to what the program they've been able to establish here. A lot of expectations for the Cougars this season. And with that being said, that's pretty much going to do it for today's episode of Pawd Slama Jama. We thank each and every single one of you guys that took the time out of your day to watch us. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, be sure to help us out if you haven't done so yet, and hit subscribe to the channel button right below. That's the easiest way to support us here on the Pawd Slama Jama YouTube channel. If you're listening us on our audio only platforms, be sure to leave them some stars in whichever platform you may be listening to, and make sure that you support us that way. And be sure to join us this Saturday, 2:30 kickoff. So that means we'll probably have around a 5:30-ish Let's Rage Cougs post-game show immediately following the end of Houston, Kansas. So we'll be there to break down everything that happens between the Cougars and the Jayhawks on the Gridiron this Saturday. Dayon, I'll toss it over to you. Where can people find you? And you get the final word, sir.
Looking forward to this game. Hopefully Houston can get their second win in a row, Big 12 win in a row. Look forward for the basketball season. It's always a pleasure to be alongside Andy. If you haven't done so already, follow me on all social media platforms. Dayon Dunlap. I have another podcast project that I'm working on called Underrated. Be sure to tap in with that. And as always, baby, it's Go Cougs.